Okay, guys, I'm really excited for you today to be here and also want to learn from you a little bit. I am going to have a poll here on the screen. So in just about a minute, I want you guys to answer the questions on the screen. So if you've never taken a poll before, that's okay. Just want to make sure you focus on the screen here when I mention that the poll is coming up. Again, make sure you're free from distraction. If you're watching the replay, make sure you take copious notes, and being here on live, you will have the advantage of asking questions. All right. So just so I get to know my audience a little bit more than what you guys have already shared, really appreciate you taking the time to be here and also already share. But here's some questions for you. I'm going to go ahead and put the poll up now, so you guys can answer those questions. I'll give you about 60 seconds to answer these 4 questions, just so I get to know my audience. So have you ever microdosed before? Have you ever sat with plant medicine with a heroic dose? If you know what that means, maybe you don't. You'll find out today. Have you worked with a plant medicine coach before? And what is your main goal with sacred plants? Mental health, physical health, or spiritual awakening? So go ahead and vote. Your vote counts. We got 1 vote in. Beautiful. If you can, appreciate you voting. And then I'll dive into the content. And the goal is to go for about 45 minutes today. We got 50% of you have participated. Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Beautiful. Fantastic. Mental health, physical, spiritual. I'll give you a few more seconds if you don't mind voting. Mickey, welcome. I just put a poll up on the screen. So again, only if you're not driving. Be safe, safety first. Give you a few more seconds to see if we can get a couple more of you to vote before I end the poll. Cool. All right. So we're about not quite 50% on people who have dosed before. And most of you have never sat with the heroic dose. Awesome. Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. We got about 75% of you participated. I do want to be able to continue here. So I'm going to share the results. So it's 50-50 on microdosing. 1 of you have sat many times. 5 of you haven't sat heroic dose. Some of you have, 1/3 of you have worked with a plant medicine coach before, 2/3 of you have not. And again, mental health is number 1, spiritual health is number 2, and physical health is number 3. Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for letting me know a little bit more about you. I'm going to be sharing a lot more about me and then the microdosing and heroic dosing do's and don'ts. I actually was going to call this just microdosing focused because that's one of my biggest focuses right now. But I get so many questions about what's the difference between heroic dose or macrodosing, whatever you want to call it. And so I am covering both topics today. So again, please take notes. We will have questions. And my goal is to go no longer than 45 minutes total time. And if you have more questions, I can stay until about 1:50 after the hour. Okay. So my intention to cover today is the science and spirituality of sacred plants and microdosing and macrodosing, key do's and don'ts, how to find a reputable source, because this can be tricky and dangerous, I have discovered. And then of course the health, and yes, even the wealth of financial relationship benefits. It went far beyond mental health for me. So I'll explain more of that in my story. And then of course the difference between micro and macrodosing, which one might be right for you, and even how to do both, like I have, if that calls to you. This is all about education, understanding, and my hope is to just pour into you a lot of great value and information, and at the end, answer your questions. And then I will also share how I help people as a plant medicine woman and transformational coach. So I love Mark Twain's quote, "An open mind leaves a chance for someone to drop a worthwhile thought in it." So whether you've sat with medicine, whether you've not, whether you've heard all your friends tell you about it or not, whether you've had good or bad experiences or no experience, I just ask you to have an open mind so that something that I drop into your beautiful mind may be a really good thing to help you be and stay curious, because I find in the plant medicine space, it's really important to stay open and curious. And I also may say something today that you totally don't agree with, and that's good too. If it triggers you or challenges you, I always love to hear feedback, and I'll share my email address at the end. So my story, why did I turn to plant medicine? Well, 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was one hurting unit. I had 8 friends who committed suicide between 2006, 2019. So I had a lot of built up grief. I lost both parents and my brother between 2018 and 2020. My brother died of alcoholism. I lost myself in work and drinking habits to keep myself numb and busy. I was uncertain about my marriage. I felt like a worthless mom. At that time, my kids were 7 and 11. And I really was lost in my career. I wasn't feeling fulfilled, even though I was making $20,000 to $40,000 a month. It wasn't fulfilling. Then came the pandemic, so I had to figure out how to be a homeschooling mom on top of everything else. And I was really just on a hamster wheel, totally numb to life. So a friend said to me, Lois, you got to heal, you got to go deep. And they recommended plant medicine, which I never done drugs. I never really even smoked ever, except for cigars with my dad. And I didn't inhale. So this was a whole new world to me. And I realized I was stuck in my head, not in my heart. I was really out of alignment. The analytical mind, a lot of trauma shut down my right side of my brain, the feminine energy. And I read this book by Michael Pollan. Type in the chat if you've read this book. If not, I highly recommend it. And also check out the series on Netflix. What the New Science of Psychedelics teaches us about consciousness, dying, addiction, depression, and transcendence. And that really spoke to me because all of those words I experienced in one way or another. I really wanted to heal my addictive behaviors. I had had a lot of grief and was afraid of death. I also wanted to expand my consciousness, and I wanted to transcend the challenges that I had in my life. Type in the chat if any of this resonates with you. Feel free to share. I love interaction, so I'm not just talking to you. So psychedelic itself means mind manifesting. So a lot of times people think of psychedelic trips, both good or bad. They think mind. And the scientists studied this just ad nauseum in the 50s and 60s. If you've studied Timothy Leary, I forget his name, Gastoff, it's not coming to me now, but there's a lot of different people in the science space at Harvard and just all over the world that were starting to study how it impacts the brain. We all have a default mode network inside of our brain. So inside of that book, I was reminded how we get on autopilot is because we have these highways in our that have been built since in utero. And our brain is developing until we're 25. And so a lot of times you get in your car and you drive home and you don't remember how you got there. That's what I'm talking about. It's the autopilot brain. And yet I also want to make sure that you understand that there's so much more about these that touch our head brain. People a lot of times think I want to heal my mind and my mental health. Well, mental health is so much more important with the help of sacred plants, but it goes much deeper when you understand all aspects of it. So I want to talk about that here. Okay. So I also never really understood Carl Jung. He was all about the unconscious mind, also known as the subconscious. Joe Dispenza's made kind of a big deal about it, but I actually prefer to study Carl Jung's unconscious mind work, talking about this shadow work. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Now, that may sound really intense, and depending on whether you believe in a heaven or hell, it doesn't matter. You understand that heaven is the highest of highs and hell is the lowest of lows. When I heard that, I was like, I think I understand, because I learned that I was so numb to life. I was so focused on the positive for so many decades, the self-help movement, Tony Robbins, fake it till you make it, never let them see you sweat. I thought I had to numb myself to not feel the negative, but in all reality, we can't feel positive. We can't actually feel bliss, excitement authentically, which I guess you could say is the heaven part of life, without also feeling the really, really sad, painful shame, guilt, fear. And that's what Carl Jung talked about. And they talk about him a lot in the plant medicine space. And I also want to remind you, I don't think my slide actually is saying this on here correctly. Hopefully you can see it, but it says the 3 brains. So plant medicine just doesn't impact your head brain. That's your logic and intellect. It also has components to the unconscious mind, which I'll come back to in a second. There's also the gut brain. The gut brain is very important. I'll explain why in plant medicine, because it actually is where 95% of your serotonin and happy hormones and neurotransmitters for this brain between your ears are produced. It's also known as your gut feelings, your intuition. A lot of us have been programmed by society, parents, trauma, all of the things to not trust ourselves, to not trust our intuition. I'm here to tell you the plant medicine helped me redevelop a relationship with my gut feelings, and it also healed my gut. I'll explain that more later. Then, of course, you have the heart brain. That's where your emotions, your passion, your desire, and dreams are all housed. I believe you're here for a purpose. One of the things that I lost was my sense of, why am I here? I had a lot of friends commit suicide, and sadly, I understood why they would go there because I thought about it myself. I had lost my passion. I lost my sense of desire and purpose. And if you look at this and you think about it, we actually have 2 brains in our body and only 1 brain up here. And yet oftentimes we forget to listen to the heart, which is the biggest brain in our body. And we forget to trust our gut, which is such an important brain to listen to, right? We can be brain dead, but still alive because our heart is still beating. And that is what the plant medicine reminded me was how these 3 brains are interconnected and so important. And the body keeps the score. You know, some people don't like this book. I like to mention it. It is a heavy book, not physical heavy, but the brain, the mind, and the body, it talks all about trauma. And it's heavy it's a lot of intense stories of trauma and traumatic events happening for people. But it really reminded me of that intensity of how much we hold on into our physical body, right? So if we have 2 brains in ultimately our body and only 1 up here, our body is so important and it holds on. It can block chakras. You can have digestive issues, which actually usually is a sign of shame, possibly guilt. You can shut down your solar plexus chakra out of fear and feeling powerless. And so if you don't listen to your body, which I wasn't, I was so stuck in my head, the analytical mind, the monkey mind, the ego was always yapping. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. I really needed the plant medicine to not just heal my mind, because again, without healing my body, the mind is not nearly as powerful. I actually have a quote that I heard from my Kundalini instructor just today. Let me find it if I can really quickly, if I can find it. Oh my gosh, did it not save? I don't think it's saved. Hold on a second. Here he goes. He says, changing the mind using the mind is tedious. Changing the mind using the mind is tedious. That's why self-help and personal development can only last for a nanosecond. It's complicated and difficult to only use the mind. You've got to go through the body to heal the body mind. And that's where the magic is. We got to go through the body to heal the body mind. For that is where the magic is. And when you think about it, with your gut brain, your heart brain being huge organs and really important to your food intake, as well as your relationships, as well as your career, because your career is also hopefully your passion and your purpose being utilized fully through it. Like I wasn't, so I felt really dead inside and I was not wanting to feel the emotions. So I would drink or work over it and just stay busy. Can anybody relate to anything I'm saying? Type in the chat if you're with me. Type in the chat if you're with me. Just throw me some love if you're following what I'm saying. It's a lot. And I wanted to be able to set the stage because it's really, really important. A lot of people think that plant medicine can be a quick fix. They think that maybe they'll just give it a try, but you also got to be ready for what's going to come. And I will tell you, my favorite purging medicines is ayahuasca, psilocybin, combo, which is not actually a plant medicine, but it's also a jungle medicine. We've also got to not only use those to, poop and vomit. That will help you get rid of a lot of the scores stuck in your body. I know I've gone to one ayahuasca and I think I lost 5 pounds just after one weekend of ayahuasca. But being able to cry, I couldn't cry. Plant medicine helped me cry. I cried this morning, honestly. And now it feels so good. If I know it's coming, I don't push it away. I allow it. It helps me feel so much better to cry. The somatic shaking and the release. When I had some somatic therapy that I added on top of the plant medicine, I was able to release a childhood trauma. I still actually don't know what it was, but I screamed, I cried, I wailed, and I shook for I don't know how many minutes, and then it was gone. I felt so much better having that, traumatic trauma release. So we've got to purge so we can start the true healing process of the body. It can be very, very physical, and you got to be ready for that. We also, according to Carl Jung, we've got to tap into not only on the unconscious mind, which is also known as subconscious again. That's where your feelings come from. That's where it helps guide direction, your decisions and action or inaction. It gets directions from our thoughts, which again, the ego can be really, really bossy and can be really, really trying to protect you to not feel those emotions and say, no, 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 don't do that. Go the other way. Let's ignore them. But then it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So by going into the plant medicine, it shuts down the ego just enough, even if you're microdosing, and I'll explain the difference between micro and macro here. But even if you're just microdosing, it can help quiet the mind just a little bit. I know when I first started microdosing, I was such a type A personality that my first dose, which was 200 milligrams of psilocybin, I couldn't stay working. I actually had to go physically sit on my couch and just sit and stare at the wall, which was completely opposite of what I had been doing, right? It was helping quiet the mind and getting me into my body. And then there's the superconscious. That's also known as your intuition. Wants to live your best life. I say that it's in your heart because that's the brain that carries the emotions, your psychic higher self, your connection to the divine, whatever that means for you. That's a whole nother conversation, but just really making sure that you understand that we have these 3 parts of the mind that also the plant medicine can help you with. Then, of course, this is a little controversial for some, but I had to share it. I just started reading the Psychedelic Gospels by Jerry Brown. And it's basically the secret history of hallucinogens in Christianity, but every major religion, starting all the way back with Hindus. So it's not just shamans. Jesus himself, again, this is personally what I believe. You don't have to agree with me, but Jesus himself was an ascended master, became an ascended master, but he was using entheogens to help with his healing, to help with his connection to God, to source, to energy, to the consciousness, right? They call it soma in Hindu time. The Siberian shamans. There's so many tribes and indigenous cultures that have been using this for thousands of years to go within and to better understand their spiritual health, which impacts the body, which then impacts the mind. So I really want you to think about this when you decide to go down this path, or maybe you just started, or maybe you've been on it for a while. Just be really mindful of what seeds are you planting with plant medicine? What do you want to see grow within you? Are you going in to connect with the divine? Are you going in for physical health? Are you going in for mental health? And what will you unearth? That's the biggest thing. When I get to the do's and don'ts, I'll be talking about this. Just know that you're going to unearth some stuff. I unearthed being in utero with my mom in the psych ward when she had schizophrenia. I was born in a mental institution hospital. You got to be ready for stuff like that. I've unearthed reliving some other traumatic events and some life events and connecting with the divine and all of these kinds of things that at some point was very scary and troubling. But then there was always the really beautiful, euphoric experiences as well. So you got to be kind of ready for anything. I always like to say, be open for anything, expect nothing, and surrender to what the medicine has for you. And because of my own experience, especially studying shadow work and now coaching on it, every flower must go through dirt. So like that lotus flower, I love using that example. The lotus is coming through some really, really deep, dark mud. And remember what I said, you can't experience positive emotions without experiencing some of those dirt emotions. And that's what I think not enough people are talking about, and why I wanted to come out and really, really share what I like to say, the good, the bad, and potentially the ugly about what this plant medicine journey might be for you. So with help, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that in a second, I was able to work through some mother, father, childhood trauma, some inner child healing, some really, really intense stuff that I was really, really not looking at. And quite honestly, psychotherapy didn't help me enough. Grief counseling didn't help me enough. And it was the sacred plants that got to the deep, deep, deepest parts of me to help me better understand those wounds. Ancestral trauma, we carry 7 generations back, DNA on both sides, mom and dad, whether you knew them or not. And we know they came in with trauma, we came in with trauma. And if you don't understand it, it can really be driving you. And that could be a huge part of your autopilot. I carried a lot of shame and guilt and fear from my ancestors, as well as addictive behaviors. So until I understood the why and how to clear it with guidance, support, integration coaches, and continuing on, because it wasn't a one and done ordeal, I didn't know. So you can't help what you don't know. My digestive issues went away. I had digestive issues on and off for pretty much my whole life. And again, I do believe that came in with you in utero. That then indeed helped my autoimmune disease. I've come down on medications for that, improved my mental health. All of that's connected. My addictive behaviors, I was able to create healthier relationships with my addictions, became conscious of my trauma responses, which I want to talk about the wisdom of trauma here in a second. I also was able to work through a lot of grief, a lot of loss. And I'm sharing this with you so you can kind of think about, what are your goals? How does this apply to you? I lost so many loved ones, and I was afraid of death as a result, but I was able to reframe my relationship with grief. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be with those emotions instead of numbing myself and drinking over it. I was able to be with it, and able to also have a complete ego dissolution and better understand what death really is. My guilt, shame, fear, I would say I'm still on that journey. However, I've changed my relationship with those words. I'm no longer addicted to fear. And I was able to shed 30 pounds and kept it off. It took me a year. I've been in plant medicine now for 2 years, studied with initiations and training, all of the things. And I was able to lose that 30 pounds in that first year, but then keep it off. And if you don't know, I've coached over 10,000 people, health, fitness, weight loss background, mental health, detoxes, cleanses, so on and so forth. I actually got out of the industry because I was tired of people looking for diets and quick fixes and magic pills and shakes and stuff, and realizing that those weren't the answers. Those were external tools. All the answers lie within, holding and releasing a lot of the emotional pain body baggage was the huge component of what plant medicine did for me. And then, of course, it impacted my relationships. It impacted my career. I didn't put that on here. Now I'm way more fulfilled, way more satisfied as a plant medicine woman and transformational coach, helping people get to the root cause of what it is that's holding them back. And I couldn't have done it without the proper help and guidance, which I didn't have in the first 6 months, honestly, of my journey. So that's why I wanted to come to you today to share with you more of what I learned through the do's and don'ts of the last 2 years. But before I do that, I forgot about this slide for a second. The trauma responses that I was struggling with before I got into the plant medicine space. Now, keep in mind, before plant medicine, I hired a subconscious mind coach. I was reading all the books and all the things about Joe Dispenza. I was meditating for years. I was doing yoga. I was, quote unquote, what I thought doing all the right things, I put in quotation marks. But because my unconscious mind and feelings were so hidden and I couldn't even begin to know, none of that worked. All of that was just a Band-Aid until I realized, and I watched Gabor Mate's Wisdom of Trauma. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend that you get that. Just Google Wisdom of Trauma. He talks about addiction, homelessness, and he also talks about how getting to that understanding and compassion for yourself through understanding your trauma responses can be a game changer. And again, for me, it was plant medicine that helped me understand my fight or flight situations. I got to understand a lot of that started in utero when I was reliving my mom and her being in the psych ward a couple different times under ayahuasca. Oh my gosh, no wonder I was always in fight or flight, because that was her experience most of her life, right? So I could have compassion for that, for her, but then also for myself. And then it's also why I kept going on the journey, because I needed to keep pulling back the layers of the onion. And if I hadn't had an integration coach, if I hadn't had breath work, Kundalini yoga, other things that I'm going to talk about later, I could have had my own return to the psych ward. So that's why I keep mentioning that it's really, really important to have plant medicine in your life, but then also to have support with it. So being able to understand where my workaholism came from, being able to understand where my people-pleasing codependent behaviors came from, which included drinking, social media, codependence on my husband, losing my identity, in my marriage, all of these things that we go through in these human bodies. Some people say human meat suits. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's also a lot when you're unpacking it, even though you're purging it, you still got to integrate it and process it. Oops, here we go. So now I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. Hopefully you've been taking notes. I do see we have a question. Are these ordered by left and right brain? It's a really simple question, so I'm going to answer it really quick. Otherwise, please hold your questions until I'm done. And my goal is to go for like maybe another 10, 15 minutes and then open it up for Q&A. Trauma responses, I hope that's what you meant, because I didn't see the question until now. Are these ordered by left and right brain? If you're talking about trauma responses, I would say no on that. Left and right brain is those are more about, right brain is creative. It's intuition, it's the feminine energy, it's the receiving energy, it's the flow energy. The left brain is the analytical mind, the logic, the numbers, the masculine energy, the execution. So the trauma is more of what it's doing inside of your unconscious mind, where your thoughts, feelings, emotions then turn into 95% of your results. So if you look at 95% of your results right now and you're not happy with them, the answers all lie within. It's all within that healing of the shadow work, the grief, the loss, the shame, the guilt, the fear, and the trauma. So I hope that was the right direction with that. So here's my list. It's not super long. I did write about some of this on my blog, but I wish I would have known these things 2 years ago when I started this journey. So hopefully these do's or don'ts are helpful. Hey, Stella, welcome. No worries. So every do has a don't. I guess, again, I don't really necessarily like the word don't. It just made sense to say do's and don'ts. Again, these are suggestions based on my experience and now what I coach on. So still do your own research. Remember, this is not meant to replace your therapy or your any other coaches or mentors or spiritual belief systems that you have. But if you feel called to plant medicine, these are things that you really, really, really got to be mindful of. Of course, do consult your doctor. I got to say that before going on this journey. Depending on which medicines you do, you actually can't be on too many medications or cocktails of whatever medications your doctors may have you on. So please consult a doctor. That's 100% do. Do not pass go until you've consulted a doctor. Be committed. Don't just be curious. This is not like joining a gym. This is not like I'm going to just kick the tires and see if it's for me. Even if you're doing a microdosing 30-day experience, or if you're doing your first sit with a heroic dose, just really make sure you're committed, not like just putting one toe in. Because especially if you do have a scary experience, which I find doesn't usually happen, especially if the set and setting and all the other do's and don'ts that I talk about are cared for, you probably won't have a bad first experience. However, there is a possibility if you don't take it seriously that it could go sideways, because plant medicine is mental, physical, and spiritually working in you to help you wake up, to help give you a shift. So really making sure that you understand that it's a commitment, not just a curiosity. It's not a quick fix. So that's number one. Number two is do your research. You can do your research, but then also, what is your gut telling you? What are you feeling called to? I wouldn't talk to all of your friends necessarily that have done it. Just really go with your intuition. Go with if you're feeling called. A lot of times in the plant medicine space, they'll say the medicine was calling you. So if you feel that call, listen to it, go for it, but then do your research, making sure that you ask questions. Possibly, you might even want to get a referral to just a handful of people who've had good success or lasting results. But then even beyond that, not only getting referrals or testimonials from those people, but when you talk to whomever you may want to coach with or whoever you want to sit with, get a lot of information about their experience with the medicine. What is their relationship like with the medicine? Where do they source their medicine? And what is their personal experience? Don't just trust blindly. Please do your research. I didn't do that. And so for the first 6 months, I got referrals, which were great, for the most part, but there was no support. There was no integration. So I was kind of in a loop for those first 6 months. I was having some really intense awakenings, some scary thoughts, and waking stuff up that I didn't understand, because I didn't understand the shadow work. I had read about it, but I didn't understand it. And there's more in do's and don'ts that go along with this. So I'm going to keep moving on. Do set intentions. I like to say, consider what mental intentions you have for mental health, what physical intentions. You can use this for all sorts of things. I had digestive issues. I asked the medicine, why do I have claustrophobia? And I got an answer. It was so profound. I actually had, been killed in many lifetimes for speaking my truth. So I had manifested an autoimmune disease in my throat, which again, technically runs in the family. It's not the disease that runs in the family. It's the experiences, the ancestral trauma. What are you coming back in to heal and learn from? And that's where a lot of, being burned to the stake and being suffocated, that's where my claustrophobia came from. Boom. I don't wake up in the middle of the night anymore with panic attacks. And now, for the most part, I can't say this with 100% absolutely, because I'm not in tiny spaces much. But when I have been, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not feeling claustrophobic, right? So even simple things like, not so simple, but you can ask the medicine, why do I have this pain, physical pain? Why do I have this digestive issue? Like I said, I've healed my digestive issues with the plant medicine. Spiritual goals, I wanted to heal my religion wound and reconnect with my true spirituality, not just what was taught to me as a kid. And I was able to create that. So if your intention is clear, the medicine will respond. And sometimes the responses might be different than what you might expect. And it's always whatever you are supposed to hear about and experience, right? So do set intentions. Also, the next do is ideally do it for yourself. I see a lot of couples going into medicine space together or doing it with their friends. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea, It's just, I am so grateful I went to that first ceremony and I didn't know a single person. It actually helped me go inward more. I just really focused on me, myself, and I wasn't worried about it. When I've done it with my husband, and we've done privates, so it was just me and him to heal our relationship. It was good, but I was also, kind of thinking about him. So if you can, do it by yourself first, and then you can always consider. And same thing with microdosing. I think it's cool if you do it as a partner or as partnerships, but again, that comparison thing is so profound in relationships. That codependency is so profound. And actually, that's one of the main reasons I went to the medicine, is I wanted to break that. I wanted to come back to my truth. So just be aware. And sometimes if you do it with friends, there could be chit chat, there could be chatter. You might end up, someone might be touching you, things of that nature. I'm a big fan, whether it's microdosing or macrodosing, that you stay silent, you stay on your mat, you stay inward. If you touch someone, or if there's a lot of chit chat, it can take you into your head. Your ego starts waking up, and I'm just a really big fan of keeping it chatter free, which is a question you can also ask before you go sit with a group. Or if you are microdosing with a partner, I've coached partners before. Just make sure you're in different spaces. That healing journey within will impact your relationship with your partner, instead of detract. So it's definitely a journey of inner work for you. Of course, I'm going to say this because I do this now, but I don't know where I'd be today if I hadn't gotten one-on-one support. Have an integration coach, someone who's sat with medicine. I've sat almost 50 times, so I may not be as seasoned as someone who's sat hundreds of times, but I've certainly had a lot of training, a lot of mentorship. Just really also make sure whoever is supporting you, guiding you, has a relationship with the plant medicine. They've dug deep and done a lot of deep shadow work and a lot of healing and working with that unconscious mind. Just tune in. You'll find the right person. Could be a breathwork practitioner. Somatic breathwork is a huge one for me. Could even be someone who's in the plant medicine space, but also a yoga instructor. Working on that mind, body, spirit integration is so critical. If you were to work with someone who wasn't into plant medicine at all, I wouldn't recommend that, maybe as a supplemental. But you want to work with someone who understands the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what could come up, because it can be really intense, can be really scary. When I started healing my mother wound, especially, because she left when I was a young kid, and I was, like I said, born in a schizophrenic experience. There was a lot to heal and a lot that came up. If I didn't have someone to call and someone with a structured program as well, I don't know where I'd be today. So just want to remind you of that. Also, do know that there is probably going to be a serious investment for microdosing and or even group. I spent on average $400, is kind of like a ballpark for a heroic dose ceremony, which again is all about, I would say 2 grams or higher of psilocybin. Ayahuasca, that's it's pretty much considered a heroic dose. You can only microdose with ayahuasca with drops. I've been doing that and it's been great. But any kind of plant medicine where there's a dosage that will help cut through that ego and through the mind and into the body, into the heart, that's really what a heroic dose is. But those are my examples as heroic dose. So you go to a ceremony, or you can sit with a private person. That's going to cost you a lot more. But most ceremonies, it's about $400 per day in a group, a lot more for private. And then microdosing, it depends on if you're working with a guide like me, but just don't cheap it out. Invest in yourself. Invest. I've seen some groups charge super cheap and you get what you pay for. I've had some retriggered traumas with groups that were super cheap and they didn't provide any support after. So it was really scary. And I decided, you know what, I'm not going to go back to those groups just because I might save a few bucks, because you're going to pay for it in other ways. And since I've shed 30 pounds, I don't see my naturopath hardly ever anymore. I don't go to the acupuncturist as much. My healthcare costs have gone significantly down. So it's a trade-off. You get what you pay for. And if you're going to make a commitment, this is like the next do that I encourage you is if you are going to make a serious commitment, consider like a plan, like your own plan of, am I going to sit with heroic medicine doses twice a year? I'd recommend twice a year is a really, really good tune-up. If you have a lot of grief, addiction, trauma, that was me. I shared with you my story at the beginning. I went every month. It was a little bit too much at the beginning because I wasn't properly integrating. I didn't have a coach. Honestly, if I could go back, I would have found a coach right away. I just thought the group ceremony was all I needed because, again, I didn't know any better. So it was about the 6th ceremony where I realized, man, I'm stuck in a negative loop. I'm bringing up stuff, but I'm not clearing it. I'm not purging it properly. Okay, so just be mindful of that. The other one, let's see here. Hold on a second. Oh, as far as microdosing goes, heroic dose, I said twice a year. If you're kind of like wanting tune-ups, maybe once a quarter. If you have a lot of grief, a lot of trauma, if you're struggling with addiction, I would do, once a month, like I did. So that's heroic dose. If it's microdosing, I wouldn't recommend. I know someone on here is asking this question. I wouldn't recommend microdosing if you're like I was. I was so dependent on alcohol. We're talking 3 to 4 bottles of wine a week, sometimes more. And so microdosing didn't do it for me. I had to go the deep dive path. The other part with microdosing that didn't work for me was I didn't have a guide. I bought from my source and I would reach out to ask questions, but because they didn't have structure, because they didn't have support, it'd be days before I'd hear back from them. And I would have like little mini, almost like trips just on microdosing. And I got scared. My anxiety came up. I've been test driving ayahuasca drops just in this past month, and it brought some stuff up in the first week of using it. And I've been doing this for 2 years, guys. There's a lot of stuff you just really got to think about. And I've had all of my sources, and a lot of them, again, most of them would take days to get back to me. So having a guide, even for microdosing, and giving it ideally 3 to 6 months to get lasting results. You can give it a shot for 30 days, see if it's even for you, because it may not be. But then if you want lasting results and you want someone to reflect back into you a mirror of what's changing, we can't see our blind spots, guys. We can't see our blind spots. So oftentimes we don't acknowledge, we don't integrate what those changes are because we're not aware of them. Remember that default mode network, the medicine can help unlock it. But if you don't journal and apply it and put into aligned action, it still has some elements of personal development or self-help, but you got to get into alignment and take action based on the feedback that the medicine gives you. So those are some other quick things. Other good do's and don'ts is if you get into the space, find a really solid community where they have monthly events so that you can go back and feel like a part of something. A lot of times I would jump from one community to the next, and I didn't feel like a part of something bigger. And then, of course, I found that not all groups are created equal, and not all shamans are really healers and helpful. So that's why you want to do your research is, find out what else do they do for you in the ceremony. And then if you find that you jive with them, keep going back and have that continuity. It's like why churches and schools and organizations tend to be your tribe, because you have like-minded people. So do find community and find consistency, continuity within that community if you can. I just saw a question in the chat. Please put your question in the Q&A feature. I'm almost done. Yeah, okay. One more do and don't. With microdosing, I do recommend 5 days on, 2 days off, or 4 days on, 3 days off. So you don't build a tolerance to the medicine. Now, these medicines aren't addictive, and yet they could be. That's a whole nother conversation. We just don't want you to build a dependency on them. The idea behind plant medicine is to help you go within, to build your own emotional intelligence, to get into that mental, physical, spiritual alignment of your truth, not just replacing alcohol with plant medicine, for example, because I was a little worried about that. So if you have that balance, you can also still have balance on your days off. Because sometimes the plants could maybe cause you to be a little bit out of it, not usually because the dose is small, but you also want to consult with a guide on what dosage is right for you. I can't give guidance on that in here. Okay. So, and then of course, because I had this personal experience, when you're on plant medicine, you want to do your best to have nutrition support. Like you will be making dietary changes before ceremony and even when you're microdosing. So it's not good to drink alcohol and dose, right? And trust me, I learned this all the hard way. So if you have a guide and that accountability and that structure for both heroic dose and microdosing, it can help you digest the plant medicine faster without alcohol, coffee, heavy meats, fatty foods, fried foods. I had a client who came and this was before I was actually asking them about nutrition, and he was getting nothing out of the plant medicine. And I'm like, this is so weird. And it was because he was drinking a lot of beer and eating a lot of pizza. That was his primary diet. So remember, especially psilocybin, but also ayahuasca too, they're going to heal your gut and cleanse and purify you. But then you can't go and just go back to drinking beer and eating pizza all the time. It is meant to also, that's why it's a commitment. You can really, really change your lifestyle if you're in that space like I was. So again, everybody's journey is different. Everybody's going to have their own process as well. So I'm open for questions now. I did want to just talk about a couple things. I sort of already covered this. As far as other health benefits, especially if you know someone who's looking to improve their focus, that's a big one. Higher levels of creativity. I've experienced that with myself on the ayahuasca drops more so than on the psilocybin. So that's where it also comes into play. Different medicines are going to do different things. The San Pedro opens my heart more. Ayahuasca, way more intense. So that's only for advanced people. I would never recommend ayahuasca to anyone if they're brand new. Emotional openness, helping you have relief from menstrual pain. If any women out there, helping you through menopause, helping you quit coffee or other substances. More energy, more vitality, heightened spiritual awareness. Those are other benefits to consider. And then I already covered this through the do's and don'ts, the difference between micro and macro heroic dosing. Set and setting is key. So I do coach on this, but just to kind of share with you a couple of journal prompts. I'll actually share my screen again because I don't see any questions in the Q&A feature. I do happen to see one in the chat. Yes, of course, you can share this with people. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you have any questions, put in the Q&A feature. I have just a few more slides. Yes, William, I answered this, but I'm going to answer it again because I went really fast. So thank you. The difference between micro and macro. Micro in Lois's definition, okay, you might talk to someone else and get a different definition because it depends on body mass, depends on trauma history and all of that kind of stuff. I say microdosing is 500 milligrams or less. Anything above 500 milligrams, 1 gram, 2 gram, 3 gram, 4 gram, on talking psilocybin, because that's my specialty is psilocybin. That is definitely the difference. So again, micro is 500 milligrams or less. Some people will say up to 1 gram, but I know people who are very sensitive. That's why I'm a little conservative. There's people who say 1 gram is still microdosing, but I know some people who can take 1 gram and they're flying off to the moon, right? So I consult people on their body mass and their diet and stress and trauma and all of that before I recommend dosage. So there's too many factors to take into consideration, but that's the main difference. And yes, you can share it. I would love if you would share this with someone. So again, put your questions in the Q&A feature. We got 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to share a couple more quick tips and then we'll wrap it up. So this is one of my favorite to help you with journal prompts. If you're microdosing or macrodosing, is what will I let go of and release? Surrender to the medicine, surrender to the process, surrender to God, source, whatever you believe in. And then what will I call in? What will I call in with the medicine? How will I stay the course? So remember, life is always going to happen for you. There's no perfect life, right? When you start doing yes, if you're saying yes to the medicine, a lot of things are going to come up for you. A lot of things are going to come up for you to distract you, to interrupt your course of events, right? And so also asking yourself, how am I going to stick with it? How am I going to stick with this journey? So what will I let go, release? What will I call in? How will I stay the course when life gets hard? And in closing, I just want to share with you guys my vision. I see a question. I'll go to that next, but I wanted to let about my 30-day microdosing jumpstart as well as macrodosing seeding opportunities here in Southern California and also in Phoenix. But my vision this year is to help 1,000 people be and become super conscious creators, working through the unconscious, getting to the heart, getting to your intuition, trusting yourself to create your best health, your best wealth, and your best wisdom this year. And one of the ways I do that with people is my microdosing 30-day jumpstart program. If you'd like to talk to me as your guide, I would love to be able to share much more knowledge. Today was a fire hose, but it's all I could fit in about 45 minutes. Let me know. You receive 2 one-on-one calls with me during that 30 days, unlimited text support Tuesday through Friday, online classes to process the stuff that's coming up for you and to integrate it. Again, it's one thing to microdose and sit with medicine. It's what happens next that's much, much more important. So you don't get into a loop and just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. I also medicine, I have amazing sources. Like I mentioned, I have access to 4 trusted sources. So that saves you the time on research and also the money, because some sources can be really expensive. Okay. I have psilocybin, ayahuasca drops, psilohuasca for advanced people, San Pedro and Wachuma. I also include online classes for all the tools that help me integrate, purge more. The plant medicine doesn't always help you purge everything. It's what happens when you go home back to real life. So I have breath work, Kundalini yoga, which helps with breath work, and chakra clearing and balancing meditation classes, super conscious creation, shadow work classes. And I also talk about nutrition. It's about $2,000 in value, but I am charging only $400 for the 30-day jumpstart. There's a maintenance option after for committed lasting results at a discounted price without missing a beat. And if you like that experience, I do encourage 3 to 6 months more to get integration, lasting results, really truly change your relationship with alcohol, really help with your healing of your physical body, your spiritual body, your mental health, whatever your goals are. Those are just examples. I will drop my link in the chat, but we also have Heroic Dose Journey Off referrals for you for psilocybin and ayahuasca only here in the Southwest US. Email me if you have any questions, lois@loiscoffee.com, or you can book a free consultation on my site. And I will get to that question here. I just wanted to give some quick dates for those of you who are wanting to sit with Heroic Dose Medicine. I can be a resource for you. April 29th, which is a week from Saturday, we're sitting in San Diego. June 10th in Phoenix. And in the summer, we're looking into a Minnesota journey. And I do have a lot more referrals where that came from, but those are just some really quick dates, because I know we got different people from here in San Diego, Phoenix, Arizona, Minnesota. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And I'd like to always close with a quote. This is a great quote that I was reminded of through this journey. Your past will be your future until, can I get back there really quick? There we go. Your past will be your future until you have the courage to create a new one. Your past will be your future until you have the courage to create a new one. I just want to let you allow that to sink in. For things to change, you've got to change. For things to get better, you've got to get better. All starts with those answers that lie within. And so I just really encourage you, if this path calls to you, let me know if I can be of service, if I can be a resource for you. And thanks so much for attending today. I will get the recording out. If you signed up, you'll get an email recording. And William had a great question about what is the best time of day to dose. I work with this on an individual level. The best time is whatever is best for you. Because if you're busy, you have kids, you have a lot going on, it's really morning, noon, or night. I've worked with people. I would just say it's like working out. Pick the best time of day for you and be consistent with that same time of day. I love the morning, but I also work for myself. I'm also willing to get up earlier to dose, to make that commitment. So just really, really sit with that and make sure that if you can do mornings, stick with that. And it's always on a fasted stomach. But nighttime before bed, for example, is great for people who want to sleep better. So that would be, again, dependent upon your goals. And I do free consultations. So feel free to reach out to me. I got to run, guys. I did go over a little bit, but I dropped my link in the chat if you want to grab that. And thank you guys so much for reaching out. Email me. My email address is also on that landing page as well. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Bridget. Thanks, Josh, Leslie, Mickey. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.